Hi Guy, welcome to the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lefarius, and in this week's show we will be taking a deep dive into Parasol Stars, or Rainbow Islands 2 as it's known. Seems that it's been quite a busy week for Amiga news, so let's jump into that before we tackle this week's game. Now, recently shown at the Revision 2019 demo party was a mind-blowing new Amiga demo by the group called Black Lotus. Proper over-the-top music, great animation, easily on par with some of the best demo stuff you'd have seen, well, way back in the late 80s and early 90s. There were loads of other videos shown, but this was by far the most eye-catching, so if you haven't heard or seen about it yet, go have a look in the show notes. 25 years later and the demo scene is still going strong. They're still pumping out some decent content, and it reminds me of being a teenager back in the 90s, which is always a good thing. On my weekly browsing for news, I managed to stumble across an Amiga site called amigafans.exec. That's EXEC. In particular, their fan-made game section. One thing that really stood out though from that list was a game called Nutmeg, a platformer where you have to take a duckling on his adventures to collect stars and rescue all of his ducky friends. It's got some great looking artwork and seemed to be loads of fun, but if that doesn't catch your fancy, there were loads of other games on offer. So have a look at the link that I'm going to post later and let me all know what you think. There's tons of games on there. It's well worth going through the list, especially if you enjoy copying things over to like ADF and trying them out as if they were first time installs. Loads of fun. The next bit of news is, well, going back to late last year, I don't always catch things when they come out originally, but I did notice that there was a game called Sir Ababol, if I pronounced that correctly, which has been ported over to the good old Amiga. Seems that it was originally designed by the Mojon twins over on the C64, NES and Specky. From the blurb, it seems they were trying to learn how to port stuff over from C into Amiga Blitz Basic, and it seems that this is the result. Graphics wise, it's not going to set the world on fire, I'm afraid, but as a part of an original 8-bit game, it more than does the job. I got some very strong Hunchback vibes from this one. 8-bit Hunchback, that is, not the arcade original. It's available on AmiNet, and I'll add a link to the YouTube channel just for you lot to have a gander and see what you think. If you are a retro gaming fan and you tend to watch content on YouTube, there's no way by now that you've not seen or become aware of Retromancave. He's really taken off in the last year to 18 months, and I really love his stuff to bit because he goes through it in great detail, explains it all and lays it out with some great footage. Anyway, he's just done a video on turning the Amiga 500 into a PC using something called the KCS Power PC with this special expansion board. He walks through it in great detail and does some comparisons of it with, like, say, an IBM PC for the time. I think it's running through emulation as a comparison, I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, he shows it off with a lot of DOS games. It really is interesting stuff, and I was really fascinated by what I was seeing, and it's something I've read loads about in magazines back in the day, but I never really imagined I'd ever get a chance to see one in action. These things were like £300, £400, £500 I think, especially when you bought all the extra bits, and he even points out in the video you would have been better off actually buying a PC with the saving you'd make. I mean, you could effectively sell off your Amiga. Oh, that's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? You know, who would have done that? Oh god, I did it myself. But the point is, you had that opportunity if you wanted to, and as a business side and a gaming opportunity, it's really fascinating to learn more about it. So follow the link over in the show notes, and let's move over to this week's game. Now you probably noticed with this week's game that I've done these a wee bit out of order, and I started with Rainbow Islands just because, well, many episodes ago, I think that was about episode 44, but as a kid growing up, I think that was one of my favourite platformers. I was really addicted to it. I had it on the Specky and later on the Amiga. Thought it was a fantastic game, and rather than go backwards even more to say Bubble Bobble, I thought we'd jump in and do Parasol Stars this week because I was really interested to see how this actually turned out on the Amiga, because it's not something I ever played as a kid, so it's completely fresh to me as of today. Now, it was published by Ocean, who were responsible for games like Batman, Beach Volley, Elf, Hook, Kid Chaos, Midnight Resistance, we've done before, Pang. That's really something I want to cover. I can't find any information on it though. If anyone has any interviews or has seen any articles or something like that, please drop me a line because I'd love to do it. Red Heat, it's Ocean. They did tons and tons of stuff. I don't need to go into everything ever produced because I'd probably send you guys off to sleep. Now, it's also written down as being developed by Ocean as well. So another in-house title. It came out in 1992 on just one floppy disk, and it could be played with 2 people, priced at £25.99. Now, the coder behind this was Mick West. He'd also worked on Darkman, Lethal Weapon, something called Rotox. I think that sounds like a very weird name. Speedboat Assassins, I do like the sound of that one. Next up with the graphics was Don McDermott. He only ever worked on a Lethal Weapon. I don't think that's a very good game, I'm afraid to say. Music wise, Keith Tinman, Batman Cape Crusader. That's something I'd like to cover, sort of. I'm not really a big fan of those comic book swapping screens. I'm not sure I'd be able to cope with doing it. Head Over Heels, that's definitely on the list. Midnight Resistance, Pushover, etc, etc. Now, next up was Matthew Cannon. He worked on Batman the Movie, Awesome Music, Civ, Elf and F29 Retaliator. Now, this was the third game in the Bubble Bobble series, though the previous 2 games were both given arcade cabinets. The third was a release from the PC Engine, with Ocean getting the license and porting it to all the 16-bit systems. Now, Ocean did include the subtitle of The Story of Rainbow Islands 2, though this was probably just to ride off the old Rainbow Islands success. Now, Mick West had been working on Darkman when it was finished. He was tasked with creating the Amiga and ST ports, mainly because he was free and had worked on other platformers before. Now, he was very familiar with the other 2 games, having played them to death. This was the first time he'd ever seen Parasol Stars join the club. They had a PC Engine in the office and Mick was able to play it all the way through before proceeding with coding the game. Taito didn't provide any sort of help or documentation beyond the game sprites in ASCII format, and he had to convert them all over to a 16-bit colour palette. When it came to things like the level designs and the gameplay, he had to work out how to make them all work, even playing through all of the levels several times until it felt just right. It seems to happen an awful lot with these arcade games. Now, Mick can't recall many problems during development beyond having to figure out how to make the stars appear on screen, and he also found that the controls were a bit problematic as the PC Engine pad used both buttons. The Amiga tends to use the one. One was for jump and the other to make the Parasol spin or use it. It seems he went with the tried and trusted method of up or jump though, so whether you like that or not is entirely up to you. He said though that seemed to work quite well once the player got used to it, but I'm sure we'll discuss the controls in a bit. Finally, it seems to have sold really well for a simple port, and Mick was very pleased with just how well it turned out. It only seemed to have a few ports though, one on the Atari STE, the PC Engine where it came from, Nintendo's Game Boy and the NES, none of which I have played. Let's start with the game story. After rescuing the inhabitants of Rainbow Islands in their last hair-raising adventure, Bub and Bob are enjoying a well-earned vacation. However, their peace is shattered when the warmongering warrior Chastican, oh my god, unleashes a magma of menacing monsters throughout the universe. With their magic parasols in hand, gifts from the grateful Rainbow Islanders, Bub and Bob must defeat the monsters and free the universe. So Bub and Bob depart from Rainbow World to take on the monsters of 7 wildly different planets. That's a bit brief. I didn't check the actual look of the manual, but it was probably a post-it note from the state of that. But it's an arcade game, we can't get too upset about the size or length of the story. The first thing you will notice about the title screen as you fire the game up is that it takes the appearance of a standard Taito arcade front with the name, high score, etc. Reminded me of New Zealand stories. Might not seem like much, but it's a nice way to fool you into thinking you are playing an actual arcade game. The opening level begins in Bubble Bobble style with a simple contained opening screen with lots of bricks and platforms to clamber over. The only difference this time is you have an umbrella as your main weapon. This can be used as a shield or to pick up and throw baddies or even items placed around each of the levels. Now the info bar is presented in black with your lives, character names and scores up the top. Bub and Bob make a colourful return and show off an upgraded look to what they certainly had over in Rainbow Islands. The first thing you will notice is just how tight the controls are. Moving around is easily my favourite part as it's a lot more responsive than any other platformers I've managed to play. Pressing fire swings the umbrella around, but holding it lets you either catch them, then throw an enemy, or gather drops like that falling from the ceiling above. You can then sling them around with the fire button. Holding fire pushes the brolly out like it's a shield, and doing the same when falling will let you float down slowly. It's surprisingly interactive for what is a simple game, and they're giving you a surprising amount of control over the actual character. Pressing up of course will jump, which will also let you leap through the floors. Honestly, it's good, it's responsive, it's just how I like it. It's the perfect form of control for an arcade game. In fact, it puts a lot of other games to shame. Yes, I'll admit it, some games do work with up for jump. You were given 3 lives to begin with and just 1 continue. 1 hit will kill you instantly and you can get extra lives. First I think it's 100,000 points, then each one goes up to a cool million at the end. It might sound like a bit of a nightmare, but there's lots of food items dotted around and those tend to come in at around 10 to 10,000 points, so you're never stuck for a chance to earn big points. Now chaining up enemies with water and throws can hit the big numbers too, as each one doubles up the more you hit in a row, so you've got to get those combos running high. A few items are scattered around the levels, including magic shoes for speed, power hearts, clocks for stopping times, there's a diamond ring which lets a star swoop in and help out, and also a bomb that takes out all of the enemies on screen. As you make your way around the stages you can collect these miracle icons. Now you find 3 of these and everything freezes on the screen, and then you can easily mop up all of the enemies with your brolly. There's also 4 mega drops that appear in the form of fire, water, star and lightning. These do things like a wave that flushes through the platforms, clearing the way, or a bolt of lightning that takes out enemies, and a field of fire. There's some pretty scary stuff in there to use against all your foes. Now the game has 7 worlds with 7 stages, as well as a bonus world tucked away to make a grand total of 8 I think. Not on the same number of levels as say Bubble Bobble, but not bad bang for your buck, especially with each world having its own boss battle. There's a lot of challenge to be had taken on each world, and it's by no means a walk in the park to get through all the stages. There isn't any sort of save feature either, but then I'm not sure why you'd need one, as it's meant to be, well, played through as an arcade game. One of the biggest pluses for Parasol Stars is the high amount of detail that's been put into every single character, items and the world in general. Every enemy moves in its own unique way with easy to see faces. Even Bub and Bob responded like in a similar fashion with their animations. They aren't like communicating with you directly, but they have lots of different looks on the faces throughout all the levels, and it makes them feel a lot more alive than say in any of the previous games. The main character sprite is taken from Rainbow Islands, but it's had a lot more done to expand the face and features with some real good animations. My favourite has to be the way the Parasol spins with its rainbow colours, all of which the Amiga shows off really well. With places like a music world, woodland, machines and even giants all mixed into these unique stages, you really get to see a lot of different places where I suspect most other games just wouldn't go as far. When the game begins, it's all single screen training, showing you how it all works, but as you move on to the later stages, they go from side to side, expanding out to make the levels a lot bigger. All of the fruits, cakes and sweets make a glorious return from Rainbow Islands with so many colours on show at once. I'm not sure how the Amiga actually copes with all of this detail. This really is a visual treat and it's one of the best and brightest arcade games I've seen so far. When it comes to the music, there's nothing on the title screen and it's only when the game begins that a theme plays. This is the same one throughout the entire game though. It reminded me of theme park music and it only seemed to change when you managed to get to the boss stages into something a bit darker. There's nothing here that's out of place for the audio and at least you can use plus and minus on the keyboard to adjust the volume. That's if the main theme becomes far too annoying. Did make me wish though that a lot more games had this as an option. The sound effects aren't really anything special, but everything has a suitable noise with lots of plings and plucks as you throw things around the screen or collect the items. I'm finding a lot of Amiga games don't have any sort of sound effects, at least in this extent. It's that time of the show though where we need to take a look at some of the game's problems. Now first of all, collision detection is a bit off. Sometimes it can work in your favour as enemies can be right beside you and not touching you at all, then at other times it will kill you on the spot. For the most part it feels like it's part of the game, but this isn't a typical fast-paced platformer. You need to take your time, so it's more of a distraction than it should be. Next up, you can't jump down through the platforms and it forces you to go around all the floors. Now some of the stages are quite big and if there's no gaps in the brickwork it can be a bit of a slog at times. With the previous two games they both seem to have a draw that would keep me coming back. You know, that need to keep on playing to get through to the later levels. I always try to give games a good go before I cover them for the shows, but this never sunk its claws into me, I'm afraid to say, like the other two managed to do. It just didn't feel very addictive for me. There's not much to do in each level beyond take out all of the enemies and collect some items. Again, it is an arcade game though. The bosses don't add much besides a stop off point. Even then they need to be taken out with the same tactics. It's fine to play in short bursts like that, but it's not very good for any long periods. Biggest problem with the whole game for me has to be it's just not Rainbow Islands. Now the magazines were quite good with the scores. CU Amiga gave it 95%. Amiga Power 88%, Amiga Format 87% and the One at 82%. This is another episode with yet another range of mega high scores. Everyone, I swear I'm not picking these games out on purpose. I've had Parasol stars in mind since covering Rainbow Islands ages ago. So when I started considering jumping into a platformer, this seemed like a safe bet. That doesn't necessarily mean I was onto a sure thing though. I can't quite place the reason why, but I just don't like it. The graphics, music and gameplay are spot on. Easily gives Bubble Bobble a run for its money, as they feel very similar in style, but at the same time for me it has this aura of being a step back from Rainbow Islands. Although that had confined levels to climb up and this has side to side areas, it just never gave me that feeling of being as free as it could be. By trying to make yet another Bubble Bobble sequel, they seem to steer clear of what Rainbow Islands achieved and went back to the basics. By no means a bad idea, but when a sequel takes an evolutionary step forward and then the next one just doesn't, it just leaves me feeling, well, a bit off about the whole thing. I guess I'm really missing the Rainbow Power as it was so unique, but the Broly isn't even on the same level of awesome. I might have been able to see past that if there was at least an option to use one as an item, but they've left that out as well. Even having the umbrella as a collectible could have worked better, forcing you to focus on a different way to play. As the third and final game though, this does achieve an awful lot. I'm really sorry to seem so down about it, as it's easily a worthy sequel to the other two. It's certainly no masterpiece, and if you can get past its flaws, which I felt it had, then there's a lot of enjoyment to be had here. Now, the bright and colourful levels match the Japanese arcade stylings that other games tend to do so perfectly, so to say this was never an arcade release seems very strange today, considering every part of it is crying out for an arcade conversion, and I do wonder if Ocean at least tried to convince Taito to bring it out as one. Imagine the reverse license money that they could have made from that. From me though, this still has to be a wary try and see title. It's fine for short bursts, and it's certainly better than some of the other dross I've covered since the show began. I think if I hadn't played Rainbow Islands, I'd do well with this. That second game will always stand out in my mind as being something truly special. At the very least, Parasol Stars is worthy of being counted amongst the Bubble Bobbles, which is really the best praise I can give it, even though I'm not a big fan of it overall. And that brings us to the end of this week's show. If you've heard anything or disagree with stuff I've said today, you can drop me a line over on Twitter, which is at AMIGArama. Pop along to the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/AMIGArama, or even drop me a snail mail or an email as it were on lefarius@amigarama.com. If you'd like to support the show in any way, you can pop along to patreon.com/AMIGArama and join the many AMIGArama fans. Happy to say that our list of supporters is growing ever bigger, and a huge thank you goes out to 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast, Adam Bradley, Darren Coles, Graham Vebke, Glenn Milford from Casual Retro Gamer Weekly, Jason Warnes, O'Brien's Retro and Vintage with their awesome retro gaming site, Pistol, who is a new Patreon, Premski, Quentin Barnes, who has also just joined the Patreon team, Retro Ravi, Richard Legg, Sneff, Steve Engeldo, and finally Treble. Thanks for listening, and until next time, guys.